What is up? It is Ethan with 3 Wine Sports, and today I wanted to make a video, my first video, on why the Utah Jazz, seen here, or here, got eliminated in the second round, despite being, in my opinion, the favorite after the healthy Nets to win the championship. I'm clearly a Jazz fan. I don't know anyone who's not a Jazz fan who would have this sign. So this is a personal topic for me. It's a topic that makes me angry. It's a topic that makes me confused. It's a topic that makes me want to make a video about it. So I'm gonna give you the couple of reasons why the Jazz lost. I think they're pretty clear. I don't even think I need to be making a video for you to be able to figure it out. But there's a couple that stand out to me as the big ones, the ones that are important, that shouldn't happen again, and then the small, annoying one that also shouldn't happen again, but probably will because it's going to fly under the radar and it's not going to get caught because it's a coach's decision, and Quinn Snyder's a good coach. So I'm going to do the small thing first, actually, instead of the two big things, because I want to give more time to the more important things. The small thing is two guys playing minutes that shouldn't be playing minutes in a playoff game. Those two guys are Mione and George Niang. George Niang sucks. Mione does not, but he shouldn't be playing either. I'm not really going to talk much about Mione. He's young. He's going to get better. He's probably going to play in the future, and I'm probably not going to be mad about it. George Niang, on the other hand, is the worst player in the league. He's the worst player in the Jazz, and he needs to be cut. I have no idea why Quinn Snyder keeps playing him. Doesn't make any sense to me. The only thing he can do is shoot threes. And if he's not making threes, he's literally as valuable as like a small toddler running around out there. He's about as slow as one. I mean, really. George Niang is so slow, and he's so bad at defense. It's ridiculous. And so he's getting eighth man on roster minutes. So, like, he's decent minutes, like double-digit minutes per game, and doing nothing but letting the other team score. It's ridiculous. I hate seeing him out there. I don't want him on the team next year. I think Quinn Snyder is going to keep playing him for some reason. I hope he goes to China. Now let's rotate to the bigger topics. I'll do the one that really can't be controlled first, and that's injuries. We had two glaring injuries, one of which was Mike Conley, who was sitting the bench the whole series pretty much until Game 6. And can't do much about that, as much as I wish we weren't paying a guy that much money to rot away on the bench. It's an injury that he really couldn't have played on. I mean, he probably could have, but it wouldn't have, look, in Game 6 he played on it, and he was really bad. So, Game 1 through 5, if he had played on it, he probably would have been just as bad, if not worse, and he probably would have kept making it worse. Have no idea if Mike Conley's going to be back next year. I kind of hope he's not. I like Mike. I really do. But maybe a young, talented point guard instead of an old, talented point guard would be a good decision. Maybe one with a little bit more size. Anyone but Ben Simmons. I don't want him anywhere near Utah. The second injury was Donovan Mitchell, and he was playing on it. It was clear he was hurt. He had his ankle sprained throughout the season, and it clearly moved into the playoffs as well. He was playing on one leg pretty much for the whole. I mean, he missed one game in the first series, and we lost that first game. And after that, he was playing. He played really good in the first series, but he was obviously hurt. Not as bad as he was in the second series. But second series, he was still hurt, but he was still playing obviously great. I think he was a top 3 player in the playoffs this year, as he was last year too, even though he only had one round last year. But he was obviously playing hurt. I think if he wasn't hurt, he would have been even better. I don't think we would have lost this series if he wasn't hurt. I don't think we would have lost this series if Mike Conley wasn't hurt. But I don't think we should have lost this series no matter what. Donovan playing as good as he was, even on one leg, we shouldn't have lost this series. Which brings me to the biggest and most glaring issue, and that's just the guys that shouldn't be playing bad. Like, guys that aren't George Niang, who should be playing bad because he is bad. guys that shouldn't be playing bad because they're not bad playing bad. I just said playing bad like 12 times. That's the biggest issue. I mean, that's why we lost. I'm gonna go from like worst guy to best guy here. The worst, not worst guy to best guy is in like played the worst. Worst guy to best guy is like worst player to best player, and how much we needed from them and how much we didn't get from them. So the worst player would be Royce O'Neal. Uh, no one's really counting on Royce to make a offensive impact. He can shoot a three or two a game, and he actually makes them pretty well. He didn't in the playoffs all that great, but he's a defensive player, right? He's a guy that is hyped up all year long as the guy that you put on the other team's best player, and he does something to stop him. He was on Kawhi, and other than in Game 2, which actually was more Bojan, Kawhi didn't ever really get stopped by Royce. And then he was on Paul George, and he just didn't stop Paul George. And Paul George isn't exactly the best playoff performer, and Royce just couldn't handle him at all. And then Royce isn't giving you anything on offense. So if Royce isn't doing his part on defense, he's a giant liability. I mean, really, if he's not stopping the other team from scoring more points than he's putting up, he's a negative. He's a negative, and he's just going to be a negative. I would want, I'm going to be talking about. It sounds like I want my whole team to be traded after we have the freaking first seed, but I would like a new guy instead of Royce. That gives the same defensive impact, but maybe a little bit more offensively. Um, I can't really put a name to that right now, but it would be nice to have a guy that has that defensive impact, but also has an offensive impact, kind of like Mikal Bridges on the Suns. Obviously, we're not going to get Mikal Bridges on the Suns, or at least I wouldn't think so, especially if they win the championship this year. But a guy like that would be nice. Uh, Next would be Derek Favors, who's actually worse than Royce. I should have started with Derek Favors. He gave us nothing at all, and by the end of it, he just wasn't playing because Quinn obviously figured out that he wasn't good enough to play, which was weird because he figured out that Derek Favors wasn't good enough to play, but didn't figure out that George Niang wasn't good enough to play. Uh, he should have figured out that George Niang wasn't good enough to play in the second game of the season, or maybe like 3 years ago. Anyway, Derek Favors sucked. He's decent on defense, does nothing on offense. He's a decent role player in the regular season. He doesn't need to step on the floor in playoffs, which you're only gonna have like 6 guys. We gotta have build a better bench. We have to build a better bench. We're supposedly one of the deeper teams in the league. Come playoff time, we obviously were not. We have to build a better bench. A guy like Jay Crowder, who we used to have, would be very nice right now. Let me think. Who I want to talk about next? Jordan Clarkson. He's polarizing in that he did do what he's hired to do in a couple of games where he comes out and just goes off for a big offensive spark and then kind of disappears. We weren't expecting much more from him than that. But after his big regular season when he won Sixth Man of the Year, you'd figure that he would have played a little bit better in the playoffs. But I'm not. I want him back. I think he's a very positive impact on the team. But as far as the playoffs, I think he could have done a little better. But I'm not going to put really any much blame on Clarkson. He didn't really have a bad game. He had some iffy games, but he did more than other people. Speaking of other people, Joe Ingles, I love him, right? He's been one of my favorite players for a long time. He played really, really bad in these playoffs. Highest true shooting percentage in NBA history, and he just could not make a shot, especially in Game 6 when we needed him. Could not make a shot. He's our playmaker when Mike Conley's out, and he just wasn't doing that. So as much as I don't want to trade Joe Ingles, I think it may be smart to put him in a package for somebody. He's old. Maybe we need to get younger. At this point, we're already good, and I think as long as we keep our big two, if we just get younger, we'll only get better. Bojan was very good. He's very underrated. He's a very underrated player all season, but I think he had a really good playoffs. He's very consistent. I'm about to sneeze. Very consistent. He didn't have a huge impact on a lot of the games. He had some big defensive impact games actually that you don't expect from him because he's underrated. But Bojan impressed me. I want him back. People talking about trading him. The only thing you could trade him. The only reason you would trade him is because he's old, just like Joe Ingles, but he's better than Joe Ingles. I'm fine with Bojan being here for a couple more years. Um, Rudy Gobert. I want to talk about Rudy, criticize him a little bit, but also defend him. Rudy had a really good playoffs this year. Really good. Like as a whole, very good. People every year he gets shown up in the playoffs. He plays bad in the playoffs. He had a really good playoffs up until like the last two games. Especially game 6. He played all right game 5, but especially game 6. He did get shown up in that game. But everybody's going to have a bad game. I really wish he didn't have a bad game in that game in particular, but everybody's going to have their bad games. I'm happy with him. I think if we had more perimeter defense, he wouldn't have ever had to even be the one that had to close out on somebody like Terrence Mann shooting corner threes all game. If we had better perimeter defense, instead of Mike Conley just watching him and putting his hand up from 15 feet away, then maybe Rudy wouldn't be getting the criticism he currently is. Uh, Finally, Quinn Snyder doing stuff like playing George Niang, Mie Ione, Tarek Favors, kind of screwed the team up a little bit, but he's a good coach. I think he'll continue to be a good coach for a couple years down the line for the Jazz. I assume he'll be here for a long time unless we just keep doing what we're doing this year, and then he may get the boot. Donovan Mitchell's going to get no blame from anybody. I would hope not. I hope there's no Donovan Mitchell slander. I think he's proven that he's a top 15 player in this league. Um, and he was playing as a top 15 player in the league, top 3 player in the playoffs with one leg. So, the Jazz, those are the reasons the Jazz lost. I think the Jazz could fix every single one of those. A couple of them easier than others. You can't really control injuries. But yeah, I mean, I think if one out of the okay, I think if one of the two big things doesn't happen, we not only win that series, I think we probably have a good chance of winning the championship. So, it's fixable. I expect us to be back next year and hopeful, disappointed but hopeful. And yeah, so that's the video. Uh like, follow, well, subscribe. And more's coming. A podcast is coming too. So be prepared.